Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. First, I want to welcome our friends here to discuss the airport plan and infrastructure and the excitement they'll bring here today. I'm going to say I'm biased in some form. Infrastructure is one of my favorite departments. Never forget to mention that because it's exciting the work you do. It's seen by everybody and it's so critical, but that's my opinion. My name is Robert Hawkins. I am the MLA for Yellowknife Centre. I'm also the chair of the Economic Development and Environment Committee. Today's committee will be receiving a brief from the Yellowknife Airport, the officials, and the Department of Infrastructure. So we're pleased to welcome everyone, including the chair of the Airport Economic Advisory Committee. Please note, this is for everyone, that this meeting is live streamed on the Legislative Assembly's media channel, and I'm sure we have thousands of visitors streaming in from all over the world, as we always do. I'm seeing the nod from our Madam Clerk. They're keeping numbers now. So that said, I'll quickly run through and introduce committee members, and we'll jump right into the presentation by our Deputy Minister, and then we'll proceed from there. If committee's in agreement, I'll just acknowledge members quickly. I have Mr. Narasu on my left. He is the MLA for Mackenzie Delta. I have Mr. Kieran Testart, MLA for Range Lake. On my far right, I have Ms. Shauna Morgan, MLA for Yellowknife North, Ms. Kate Reed, MLA for Great Slave, and Mr. Julian Morris for MLA for Franklin Lake. That said, if committee's in agreement, I'm now going to turn the presentation over to our presenters. Please, we are on, we have we have staff controlling the mics, so again, just as a friendly reminder for those we haven't seen in a while or those who haven't been here before, all questions have to go through the chair because the system has to keep control of it. And we do have operators, so the mics will operate automatically. That said, Deputy Minister Luditz, please lead us off and introduce your guests and let us know when you want to proceed, or have to proceed as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Certainly appreciate those kind words. We, at Infrastructure, we recognize that we deal with the public every single day, whether it's on our highways, our airports, our licensing systems, and it's a role we take very serious, whether we're, whether our role in the evacuation, our role in building additional infrastructure, schools and health centers and such. So I'd like to thank you for having us here today to provide a briefing on the Yellowknife Airport, the economic strategic initiatives, goals and objectives. This is also an area that personally I have a very like you, I'm very personally involved in this one. I've worked at the Yellowknife Airport for 25 years, and it's near and dear to my heart. With me today, I have from the department, I have Mr. Sam Shannon. He's the Assistant Deputy Minister of Regional Operations. I have Mr. Jason Carroll, who is our Regional Superintendent for the North Slave. I have Mr. Randy Straker, the Regional Airport Manager for Yellowknife Airport. Ms. Sarah Hodgins, Business and Marketing Officer for the Yellowknife Airport. And Jennifer Lucas, my Senior Advisor. Also joining us today is Mr. Peter Vishian, Chair of the Economic Advisory Committee. And in today's presentation, we'll provide you with insights into the value that Yellowknife Airport brings to the territory. We'll discuss the complexities of the airport, the collaboration amongst our many stakeholders, which is pretty much everybody, and that makes the daily and what makes our daily operations possible, our bustling activity levels, our significant contributions to the economy, and finally look ahead at anticipated improvements aimed at enhancing both the customer experience and enduring value at YZF. So we'll wrap up with an overview of our next steps as we continue to move forward with the Gateway strategy, and with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Sam Shannon to go through the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Shannon, if you would please, and I believe we're operating these slides, or? Oh, you have the slide. All right, so all members have the presentation, as well as we can see it's online being streamed, so please proceed as you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll skip ahead a slide or two here. So this slide just gives a bit of an overview of where we're going to go with the presentation and gives a nice aerial picture of the YZF Airport site. So you can see the 2 runways and all the facilities surrounding it. Okay, so work completed to date. So there have been a number of stages completed over the past 5 or 6 years to bring us to this point. There's plenty of detail in the summary notes that were provided, so in the spirit of time, I'm just going to summarize that quickly. In 2018, Stantec completed a 20-year master plan focusing primarily on the air terminal building. They looked at 2 sites, both the existing site and on the west side, which is the opposite of the existing terminal, and comes off of Decho Boulevard. It provided for growth of the terminal in phases, triggered by growth in both passenger movement and flight volume. It also noted that the 2 runways were adequate over a 20-year time horizon, but would benefit from extension and the addition of a parallel taxiway. In 2019, following the recommendation of the Economic Advisory Committee, a market and economic analysis and airport development program was developed by consultant MXD. The analysis included a regional overview. It identified economic sectors impacted by the airport. It identified employment and population trends and provided economic positioning direction for the airport going forward. It also explored 5 alternatives for future development at YZF, ultimately landing on a recommendation to develop the south area along with retail. Following the market analysis, Dillon Consulting was contracted to consolidate the 2 documents and conduct stakeholder engagement on the 5 options identified by MXD. The end product, while something to build from, did not quite meet the needs for the airport and didn't quite provide the strategic direction necessary to allow for further development at that point in time. So at this point now, the stage that we're currently in, we're working with Intervista, so leaders in airport strategic direction and planning, and Tom Ruth, the former CEO of Edmonton International Airport, to build on all of that previous work and to finalize a Yellowknife Airport, or YZF, strategic plan, now known as our Gateway Strategy. That Gateway Strategy will be an action-oriented document that will include a capital improvement program for the short, medium, and long term. So moving on to the Yellowknife Airport Economic Advisory Committee. If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'll hand it over to Mr. Vishian to speak to their role.
Thank you for that. Mr. Vishian, it's so good to hear from you again, officially now.
Morning, thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a few years since I've sat before committee, but let me explain a few things about myself. I'm a resident of Northwest Territories for over 40 years, professional engineer and independent consultant right now. I finished with the GNWT in 2016 after 3.5 decades, including 17 years as Deputy Minister of various departments. So it's a pleasure to be here again and working with the Department of Infrastructure and the Minister to support this initiative in terms of advancing the economic opportunities at the YZF. Our committee is made up of individuals. It's an independent committee. It's not representative of organizations, but a number of members individually bringing forward their thoughts, advice, and insight into the economics of the airport and its importance to the Northwest Territories. I mentioned their names: Jen Hayward, Jen's with Outcrop, Kelly Kalo, K Squared Consulting, Tim Sire heads up the Los Alamos here in town, Mark Henry with H2 Consulting, Kathy Bolstead, a consultant here in town, and Rebecca Connolly, VP of Deton Cho. So it's made up of individuals very dedicated to advancing this economic agenda. Our role in this committee is to provide advice to the deputy, the department, and the minister with regard to the opportunities of the airport, particularly on the economic frame. We do not get involved with the daily operations of the airport. That's left in the capable hands of Mr. Straker and other teams at the airport, but we'll make commentary on issues, obviously, that pertain to that. This is my second term, appointed term on the committee. We had a hiatus, obviously, during the pandemic period, but as indicated, Mr. Shannon said, the current initiative is the YZF Gateway Strategy, which we see as critical in terms of attracting investment and providing an opportunity for what we see as both direct but induced, indirect, and catalytic kind of investment that this airport provides. And if you look at most airports around the world, this is a very significant piece of any community, any region. And this is a territorial airport, and its hub nature, as compared to other airports in the world, is very significant in terms of its opportunity. So I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Shannon, but happy to take questions through the committee hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We probably will have questions at the end, and we'll probably save them considering the limited slides we have, so it's pretty good. So that said, Mr. Shannon, if you would continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a bit of a snapshot kind of on where Yellowknife Airport fits. So Yellowknife Airport plays a crucial role in supporting the population growth of both Yellowknife and the Northwest Territories. It serves as a vital hub for various operations, including cargo, charters, general aviation, medical travel, national defense programs, and commercial air services. With over 500,000 annual movements, the airport serves as a key connector for services across the entire territory and acts as a gateway to the northern regions of Canada. Furthermore, the airport significantly contributes to the economy by providing approximately 1,000 direct jobs and generating nearly $600 million in economic output. To make sure that we make the most out of this role, the Gateway strategy has three main focuses. First, we aim to fully understand and appreciate the value Yellowknife Airport contributes to the territory in a variety of ways. Second, that we have a range of programs identified and in place to support our partners and stakeholders at Yellowknife Airport. And finally, that we're identifying long-term developments to accommodate the planned growth of the territory in Canada over the coming decades. As mentioned, one of those key areas is national defense. So it's essential to highlight the crucial role the airport plays in supporting the Canadian Armed Forces, particularly through its involvement in the NORAD Forward Operating Location Program, known as the FOL. Yellowknife Airport collaborates closely with the Department of National Defense, ensuring that the airport's facilities and infrastructure are safe and reliable for their operations. This partnership ensures that the airport is prepared to respond promptly and effectively to any situation that may arise, reinforcing its importance in national defense efforts. As noted in the bottom left corner of the slide, in June 2022, the announcement of $36.8 billion for NORAD modernization was made. Within that program are the Northern Basing Infrastructure Program, which focuses on the 4 FOLs that I mentioned earlier, and the Future Fighter Capability Program, which is linked with the F-35s. Both of these programs are looking at the existing FOL infrastructure and determining needs. Yellowknife Airport staff have met on several occasions with defense and their planners over the past 2 years to discuss facilities, operational capabilities, and land use. The scope and timing for these projects has not been finalized or communicated to YZF. But we do know the capability for both of these programs is around approximately 2032. So this slide provides a bit of an overview. Moving back to the air terminal as it exists today. The slide provides an overview of some of the more short-term areas that have been identified for capital improvement. These improvements would help extend the life of the existing terminal building as planning and preparation for a future terminal continue. So as noted on the slide, this includes the check-in area, pre-board screening, washrooms in the terminal, airside mobile bridge adapters, and the baggage claim areas. In terms of next step, as a bit of a summary, I hope it's clear that the integral role that the Yellowknife Airport plays in the territory, and it's only getting busier. We connect the territory by land and air, and our forecasts are strong for continued growth. So as we move forward, we hope to continue collaboration with both Mr. Vishian and the Economic Advisory Committee, along with key stakeholders in our community and in our territory. In terms of the Gateway strategy, Intervistas, who's our current consultant that I mentioned earlier, is continuing to work on the completion of 2 more case studies to help support the plan going forward. As I mentioned, we're working on the short and mid strategy for capital plan improvements. And once we have a draft of that plan, we'll be developing an engagement process to engage with stakeholders, governments, Indigenous governments, and things as we work forward towards finalizing our Gateway plan, and then move on to implementation. So with that, that's the end of the presentation. Thank committee for the time, and happy to take whatever questions we may have. Thank you.
I'll thank you for your presentation. I'll start with Ms. Reid for questions. So typically we ask a question and a bit of a follow-up, just to try to keep things moving. So Ms. Reid, please, if you would lead us off first, and then I have Mr. Morris after you're done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. Greatly appreciated. So I wonder if the department or the board could speak to capital improvement timelines. I noticed that you're saying here that there will be updates presented at your EAC meeting this month, but is there any sort of general timeline around some of the terminal updates? I ask because I get a lot of questions about the security lineups, for example. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I should say I'll send them to you, Deputy Minister, first, unless you point to me, just to keep the flow moving, unless you point to a particular member. Okay, so Mr. Stryker, if you would, looks like you were getting the honor of the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess in response maybe to more your specific question around pre-board screening, we did have some challenges again this year and continue to kind of return to that congestion scenario that we were in pre-pandemic. This year we were getting close to 500,000 passengers at YZF. Next year, we're estimating we're probably going to be closer to 600,000 passengers because we're continuing to see strong growth. So we have met and started a dialogue with CATSA, who is the owner of screening, and that's where we put our applications in for any types of upgrades. So this spring, actually, after the spring break period, and we experienced some issues there, we focused on CATSA in particularly. Met with CATSA and the carriers and started a dialogue on upgrading. On the capital improvement plan, it's part of our short-term goal to look at, I guess, a small expansion of the building to allow 2 lines. But we were looking for something a little more immediate in nature to kind of address the immediate need. So through discussions with CATSA, they have supported a move to what's called CATSA Plus. They've recently come out with a modular design, which is a little smaller than what they previously had, which with some minor renovations, we would be able to put into the terminal. Currently, our throughput's about 100 passengers an hour. CATSA Plus would up that to 200 passengers an hour, and they've seen as high as 300 per hour when it's kind of firing on all cylinders. So next steps on that is working with infrastructure to put in a funding application. It has to go through an approval process with CATSA. So we'll be working on that in the coming weeks to get that in, and it is worked its way up through CATSA already, so it is a known item and concern. In regards to the capital improvement plan in general, we have been working with InterVista, kind of setting up some priorities. We do have a lot of items that, not so flashy items, but prior to the revolving fund where we're competing for projects, a lot of these things such as runway repairs, taxiway repairs kind of ended up being low priority items. So we still have a lot of items that we need to address. So over the next 5 years, we have a fairly aggressive plan being set up, which will include some terminal improvements, as mentioned previously by the ADM. But in particularly, we are looking at pre-board screening and making some fairly quick improvements on that.
Thank you, Mr. Stryker. Ms. Reid, if you had a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. That's a positive direction. I'm glad to hear CATSA is a willing partner. So the question, I'll take it up a little bit more of a high-level question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, after receiving this presentation, if the YZF or EAC or infrastructure, all of you as a whole, are looking at possible models to into the future to make YZF an authority. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Minister, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this point, we haven't put a lot of effort into the authority. Right now, we're still working on finishing up recovering from the COVID and getting our numbers back up. At this point, it hasn't been a priority and it hasn't been something that we've looked into, but it is obviously a possibility for the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, if that doesn't spur on a last-minute clarification, I'll now go on to sometimes. Mr. Morse, if you would please, and I don't have anyone after that, so feel free to draw my attention if you wish to ask questions. Mr. Morse.
Yeah, this one's probably, I guess, mostly directed to the department, but, you know, I look at the way YZF has been operating and, you know, the success you've had with the revolving fund as somewhat of it's a good news story. And I'm wondering if you're looking into kind of taking this model to some of the other regional central airports in the NWT, kind of looking to expand it. Maybe you already have, but I'm just curious if we can kind of learn from this success and take it elsewhere in the NWT to see if it'll work.
Morris? Yeah. Deputy Minister, if you would, please. Thank you.
We're taking aspects of the program to other airports, but most of the other airports don't have the business case or the passenger volumes or flights. Most airports get their revenue from parking, from landing fees, and from general terminal fees, and most of the other airports don't have that. There are benefits, and there are opportunities for us to share best practices. There's been opportunities where we've actually taken equipment from Yellowknife Airport when we're and moved it around throughout our system through a transfer of funds. So there's been opportunities. We always are looking at those where we can find those economies, but the business case I don't think is strong enough in most of the airports. But it is something as Nuvik in particular, as it grows, it'll be something we want to be looking at. And there are obviously a lot of activities around D&D that are circulating that involve both Yellowknife and the Nuvik airports.
Thank you. No, nothing further. I have Mr. Testart, and then I have Ms. Morgan. Mr. Testart, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was an MLA when the revolving fund came around, and I think it's good to see how it's progressed and has worked as intended to take pressure off the department supporting all airports and allowing Yellowknife to be more autonomous and self-sustaining. So I support that. I would like to see an independent authority one day, but I think recovery after COVID is prudent. My only question, and this seems frivolous given our remit as policy or holding government to account for policy, but the parking arm. No, I'm serious. The last time I had to use it, it wouldn't read my ticket, and 2 security people had to come, and a queue of cars formed behind me, and this is like consistent that this arm does not work. So what's the plan for that? Maybe Mr. Straker can answer, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Testart. And just for the record, I didn't plant the question because this is always a frustration of mine years ago. So, Mr. Stryker, if you have some guidance and inspiration, certainly, I'm sure we'll welcome it. Please.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. Yeah, we've had a lot of, I'll be honest, we've had a lot of challenges with the new parking system. We continue to have dialogues regularly with the vendor. We have seen some improvements, I would say, in the last 4 weeks. Are we happy where we are today? No, there's still some challenges. I think the positioning of the ticket reader, kind of a south-facing direction, sun played created some havoc. So we are looking at adjusting the height of the actual exit machine. Hopefully that will help with scanning. And we do have the vendor up here on a somewhat regular basis to address those issues. So we'll continue to work on that and try and make improvements. It is a huge piece of our non-aeronautical revenues. We had no parking system for a couple years, so I think we're generating close to, on our 2 parking lots, close to $250,000 now. So it's a huge contributor to non-aeronautical, which then is a huge benefit to carriers because we're not passing a lot of those O&M costs because we're recovering it through things such as the parking system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything further, Mr. Testart?
Thank you for that. I mean, that shows the importance of it. So having sound parking is not frivolous, but could you give us timelines on potentially when those changes are going to come in place? Just so if someone asks, I can say, oh yeah, they are working on it and you can expect it by this summer or next year or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testart. I assume we're going back to you, Mr. Stryker.
I know we do have plans to do that work this summer on particularly the exit gate. And as I mentioned, we do have them up regularly. So we have a running list of items that we have for them when they arrive. So hopefully we'll have most of these issues resolved this summer when they come up for their next inspection and work trip for us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just not to steal Mr. Testart's question, but so you're saying they are not here whatsoever when they have to do the repair, so we're held hostage by them having to come to Yellowknife to, so in other words, the infrastructure's down until that is, I go to you, Mr. Strecker, for a question.
Have a support line that we can contact, and then we also have a local vendor when we run into more technical issues that we're not capable of handling that will come out and work on it. But some of these longer-term kind of nagging problems that are either related to software or configuration, sometimes we just have them come up to do the repairs.
Fair enough, thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure we understood response time and how that was associated. I now have Ms. Morgan, and I think Mr. Narasu wanted to come in on some of this stuff. So Ms. Morgan, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know a number of years ago when I was with the City of Yellowknife and we were looking over the master plan sort of vision, there was still talk about, you know, the big picture or long-term perhaps, like establishing a big airport hotel and sort of a big complex out there. And I know the city has been very concerned that that would take visitors away from other parts of the city, including downtown, other parts of the city, and would really take away from the, you know, economic development opportunities for the city as a whole if visitors just came, hung out at the airport and left. And also it was unclear what the need was for having a hotel right at the airport. Is that still part of the vision? Or where, you know, where is that at, the suggestion of the airport hotel?
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. I go to the chair, Mr. Vishian, please, if you would.
Martin, the bang on point in question. At that time, the EAC had asked that a consideration be given, like most airports, especially a hub nature, for accommodation services at the near or about the terminal service. That topic still remains a topic of discussion, by no means a decision at any point. And part of the land use development side will give consideration to thinking about a future investment as part of accommodation service. But that decision hasn't been made. This process of the Gateway strategy is intended to do that, have that discussion. The plan is, of course, to engage with all of the respective governments, the city government, the First Nation governments, and also obviously the federal government in regards to their issues. But we see this as basically a topic of discussion, not a decision point. And I know that it did cause a great deal of controversy at that point in time. It's one of those things that we've also heard from different economic groups that said this is worthy of a consideration, but again, not a decision. So there are a number of groups we've spoken to in the past many months that said you should revisit this topic and have that discussion. I don't have a position by any means in terms of where we might be going, but in the land use development scheme of things, it is a topic that I think is worthy of a further chat. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Morgan, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can you explain how and when that decision will be made? So it's still sort of sitting in limbo, it's a discussion. What's the path forward? When will that decision be made? Who makes it, and what's the process that leads up to that? Okay.
Thank you for that. Mr. Vishian?
Taking the first step, Mr. President, I'll turn to Deputy Luda for maybe a follow on the decision making. This process of the Gateway strategy is intended to look at the bigger picture, long-term picture, a land use development plan. Do you set aside lands for certain purposes, logistics, defense, and so on. That plan then will go forward in terms of an advisory plan to the department, and it will be the department's decision, obviously the legislature's decision if it involves I think a policy line at the airport, but that decision is yet to come, and I don't anticipate that to be done until this process is complete, which is anticipated to carry on into an engagement session here into the fall. So I would not anticipate anything of a nature of the land use plan decision to be any sooner than probably end of year.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Did you have further to add?
I think just to reiterate what Peter said, I think we're fairly early in this stage. I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen. This plan is going to tell us, or is going to help guide future investments from our stakeholders, our tenants. It's going to, but I guess the overarching is there's a lot of work to do before we get to that point. If we're going to be developing off the Engel Business District, there's an opportunity to we're going to have to bring in water and sewer. If you have a hotel just for the fire suppression system. So we're a long ways away from there, but we do want to work with we will be working with our stakeholders, obviously the city with the Engle Business District. If we were to bring in water and sewer, that'd be beneficial for them, so it'd be something we'd want to do in partnership, but we're just not there yet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Actually, that was one of my questions, which is how are you meeting the infrastructure needs specific to water and sewer? Because Air Tindy at the time had a great frustration about having to maintain water inside, et cetera. So this would only have higher demands of infrastructure needs. So, but I'll come back to my specifics now that it's interesting. I'll go to Mr. Narasu, then Mr. Testart, and we seem to be doing well for time. So, Mr. Narasu, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. My question is around sort of probably the futures. We have a large number of drugs and other activities heading north through Yellowknife. And I've been asked, if they can do something about providing security going north. More strategic measures, because it is evident that these people are bringing drugs north and they're not being, I don't know, maybe going through security, but they are getting through. And is there any measures that, or future measures that the airport may take in terms of providing security for people heading to Inuvik or Norman Wells? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very much. Deputy Minister, if you would.
So that is under the mandate of the RCMP and through Justice, and it's something I will bring forward to the Deputy Minister of Justice after this meeting to bring that forward. As far as screening for the northern destinations is governed by CATSA, whether they make those decisions. At this point, those flights aren't going screened, and even if those flights are going screened, there's a limited detection for drugs, and normally they have to bring in drug dogs and stuff. And it is something we have had in the past. The RCMP I've been there quite often over the years to bring the dogs out and screen for drugs, and it's something that I do see that as a very valid point, in that a lot of these communities, the only way you can get into in the summer months is by air. So if we're able to curb the bringing drugs in, that would be good for a healthy community. So it is something I'll bring forward, but it is under CATSA and the RCMP under their mandates. But happy to champion that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that help and offer. Mr. Narasu, did you have anything further or different? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be, bring this message back to my riding, especially with the Indigenous government leaders. I'll see what, if there's any measures that they can take, or if they can work with the YZF and trying to get some kind of measures in place. So it's more of a comment than just a question. Thank you.
Not a problem. So not seeing any interest, not seeing any need to comment back, but it is a comment if you get us back, and I think get back to us, and the Deputy Minister said he would reach out to you as well. So that's good. Mr. Testart, if you would, you were next, and not seeing any other members after that, I'll probably throw in a few questions thereafter. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to talk about how how the airport is working with the Yellowknife Dene First Nation. The chiefs have been very clear that there are some cultural aspects to the airport that are not appropriate in their perspective for where the airport is situated on Chief Dragi's traditional territory. I'm talking about the polar bear. So has there been any effort to work with the chiefs to move that bear to a different part of the airport and to have a more culturally appropriate KHO, Chief Dragi's YKDFN based display when you first come into the airport, as they've requested? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testart. Deputy Minister, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start and I'll hand it over to Randy, but we have had those conversations. We're well aware of the polar bear. The polar bear is something that I've been told anecdotally that it is the most photographed thing in the Northwest Territories. I know when I was airport manager, I probably personally took 500 pictures of tourists in front of it while walking through the terminal. So it's certainly really, really important. We don't want to give that up, and there are polar bears in certain parts of the Northwest Territories, and being a territorial airport, we recognize that. We do want to work to find something that is more culturally representative of this area as well, and you know what that looks like. I'll let Randy talk, but I don't know if any decisions have been made, but I'll pass it over to Randy with the chair's blessing.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Mr. Stricker, do you have any insight or suggestions?
YZF has had, I think, 2 meetings, both with Waikideni and City of Yellowknife, looking at possible options and solutions for a replacement. A preliminary sketch and suggestion was put forth on the last meeting. They're now, as a group, looking at funding and kind of a time frame for that. We haven't spoken to them, I think, in the last couple months here, but the plan is to move ahead on some type of similar type display, but more representative, I guess, of the region. And Waikideni and City of Yellowknife are key partners in the decision on that.
Thank you. Mr. Tester, did you need anything further?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that update. Look, I think the mayor has been has a good suggestion. This is don't get rid of the bear, right? Like this is not just the Yellowknife Airport, but it is the gateway to the north. So keep the bear, just move it to a less prominent area and focus on the first peoples who have called this place this land home since time immemorial. It's the perspective, and I think it's shared by the city and the First Nation, and that should be enough evidence to move forward quickly on it. And I know it's been a stubborn conversation for some time, so I'm really pleased to hear it's going forward. Thank you for that. On the economic side of things, I think when you have kind of a revenue opportunity like this in your backyard, it could be a great opportunity for economic empowerment and economic reconciliation with the Yellowknives. How are you ensuring that the YKDFN is a full economic partner with the airport and can seize opportunities for investment? Because they can also bring their own investment because they're open to opportunities that the infrastructure is not. Thank you.
To the chair, Mr. Vishian, please, if you would.
That question is totally within the sphere of what the EAC's been advising, and appreciate the question, one of great significance. And the issue of YKDFN particularly and their opportunities is front and center. And as you probably know, their economic arm, Teton Cho, is a significant player in the operations out of the airport with regard to a number of the businesses that they operate there already. Discussions even continue on, and some of them related to the defense opportunities in the future that emerge from DND's proposed plans are significant. As you see that Ms. Connolly, VP on strategy for Teton Cho, sits on the EAC, so you can appreciate that we're hearing front and center about some of those big opportunities that can happen. We do see that continuing on. The challenge right now is the vision of the airport and the investment opportunities at the airport are part of this gateway strategy. So identifying the land use plan that makes sense for the airport, the kind of things that a group could possibly pursue, and basically see where those challenges or those opportunities can happen. It's an exciting time. It really is the hub opportunities there. And I'll just reinforce that last fall, all of us being elsewhere for a few weeks, reinforced the logistical nature and the hub nature of this airport as it serves all the communities in the Northwest Territories and elsewhere, Kitikmeot and also in further Nunavut East. The whole issue of how this airport operates between the business model and its sort of service model is front and center. And it's a time right now to look at that and as well look at the opportunity that the defense agenda can bring in terms of expansion of this airport. So that's exactly the kind of topic that we've been discussing here with the department and advancing those advisory positions and recommendations by the committee. I see a great future for this airport. I see nothing but great opportunity and mostly entrepreneurial and investment opportunity. This, if I may, airports are what they call economic hubs. They're economic cities. And if you go and spend a lot of time traveling, you'll notice that in terms of how much attraction to investment there is. And it's not just direct, it's this catalytic investment where basically new businesses emerge as a great opportunity to build the community further, jobs, business, types of things that we're looking forward to seeing and building this community up. And of course, without a doubt, the tourism opportunity. This is front and center. And we've had excellent engagement with the tourism representatives. And I'll finally say that as part of the presentation, as Shannon presented, the case studies that we're underway right now, one of them is specifically with Deton Cho and is seeing how they see the future and what they need from the airport to support that future economically. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I don't have anyone on the list, so I'm just going to jump in with a couple questions, and I'll interrupt myself if, in the sense of I'll pause if members want to take off on a particular matter that I raise or that stirs them. So I just want to say first, it's exciting to hear Tom Ruth would be involved again. I know his work with Canadian North, and then he did a few other odds and sods and ended up at the Edmonton International Airport. And I can't assume it's solely developed on his vision, but I certainly know his leadership probably brought that like a good conductor together, all the important components. So Edmonton is such a different airport since he was there and since moved on, but it's his work. So I can anticipate his involvement with this is probably an extraordinarily lucky move on our part. So the Gateway strategy, and maybe I'm just going to roll it into the InterVista plan and case study. I may have missed it. I checked with our staff here. Maybe I didn't miss it. When can we anticipate something that we can see or have our hands on? Just out of curiosity to follow what's happening on those types of initiatives? Because eventually you'll be going through infrastructure, obviously, and infrastructure will be wanting to talk about how do we get to another phase of opportunity and excitement, as our chair of the committee has talked about. So that said, who would like the question? Deputy Minister, you want to start?
Sure, I can start. Certainly, I do think it's a really exciting time. I echo your sentiments about Mr. Tom Ruth. I think we're very fortunate to have him on. He's been up from a northern perspective. He's worked up here and operated here. And with airports, he's very well respected across Canada. So it's something, and I agree that Edmonton Airport has made significant progress, and he works well with. We've got a great team here, and from the EAC, we got a good broad range of skill sets. We've got a good range with the staff. But I will ask Peter to talk a little bit about the plans.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Mr. Vishin, if you would, please help us.
Chair, also reinforce Mr. Roos' sort of CV in the context of things. I'll mention also he was the CEO of Halifax Airport. And I have been the Northwest Territories representative on the Edmonton Airport Committee for a number of years now. So obviously I'm directly involved with the CEO there, and Tom, of course, being there for many years. So it's been a great opportunity to bring back that information and that connection to that gateway in Alberta, which operates in a similar fashion. The process going forward is to hear from InterVistas in the meeting in June, where we'll be receiving presentations on the case studies and also on the capital improvement plan. So I can't speak to those till we see them. At that point, as I said earlier, the next phase of the project is that engagement session with we call the representative governments, and the city government, of course, the federal government in an ongoing way in different categories, the territorial government. There are other departments that will be engaged as well, First Nation governments as well, in terms of understanding that. So that process will then continue. I anticipate a bit of a hiatus during the summer months, but basically in the fall we'll see that re-engage. I would anticipate, as I mentioned earlier, probably by the end of the calendar year, we'll see a package ready for consideration. Now, all those things are subject to other issues that happen, but we think that that's a prudent approach, one that's been thoughtful, one thought through all those opportunities, engage with those that have an interest in this airport, those different businesses. Like I did mention Deton Cho is one of the case studies. I'll mention there's also tourism case study underway, a number of others. I think you'll all find very interesting how those economic opportunities will play out with real people that are doing real business and really looking at investing in the Northwest Territories and YZF. So if that schedule meets the government's agenda, we look forward to participating and helping through all that process. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Oh, it's all exciting stuff. I just want to provide a side comment, different parking experience observation. One is I noticed the airport's, whether formally or informally, creating a standing area, a waiting area, waiting to pick up the loved ones in the sense of on the side. So I don't know if that's formalized or informal, but I can only imagine congestion is frustrating. And so that, in the sense of, you can only keep, rounding this or circling the square so much type of thing. It's difficult. So I recognize that that's a challenge. But that's the lead into my next question is, what is the life of the current facility? And I'm referring to the current airport and its existence. So it does have a life cycle. And I remember it's probably even the deputy minister and former deputy minister about the old airport, that little shoebox thing. And so this was quite the phenom in the sense of how exciting it was, but it has a life. So deputy minister, I'll go to Mr. Stryker for some update on it, the building life or how we're meeting those needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as building life, I think we're in iteration 4 maybe of this building through various expansions, the last being the expansion of the hand baggage system on the north end. We can continue to limp this building on probably for a significant number of years. The bigger challenge is not going to be the life of the building, but more the capacity of the building. We have a lot of restrictions on where we can grow, and then we have the restriction on its proximity to the runway. So on what we call airside, or where the aircraft are parking, we're about as close as we can get to the runway, and we really don't have any growth opportunities there. Passenger numbers are typically what will drive planning in the future when you look at the master plan. And that's one thing that we'll have InterVista just go through here in the next little iteration, is just validate those triggers for us to see if they're realistic. So looking at peak passenger hour, total passengers, just to see what we can manage. And then as we look at the capital improvement plan, the small improvements we make to the building just to extend that life. Because obviously if we decided that, in the next year or so we're going to move to a new location, we're talking 7 to 10 years before we realize that. So there's a lot of work that we have to do today to kind of, how do we keep this functional for the next, say, 5 to 7 years, and start planning for the future of a new location for the ATB. So, I would say lifespan, we're probably in the 10-year range max. But again, we'll have to see what we can do to kind of mitigate some of the challenges that we're going to see even this year.
I think thank you very much for that answer. I mean, that's the kind of sense, we know we don't, well, sure want it probably tomorrow, but that said, I mean, one has to be realistic. These things don't get created overnight. So the chair would like to offer some further insight. Mr. Fishing, if you would, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just add to Mr. Straker's commentary from the EAC perspective. A number of issues will drive this need for a future terminal, and the existing one, as you've both mentioned, is really at a point where you can't do much with it. I would like to say the EAC also is very focused and very advisory on 2 key elements of sustainability of the existing infrastructure and how that fits our model of going forward. You can't do that much more to airport terminal building when it's been already built, the mechanical systems and so on. There's a lot of money that would have to be spent and a lot of disruption. So there's that issue. There's also the accessibility issue, and I think all of us are very cognizant of the key issue in Canada and across the world, that accessibility has to be a front and center topic in aviation, and how to make sure that our passenger experiences and the operation of our airport are also front and center. So those types of things, again, very complex to integrate into an existing facility. Things are happening. I compliment the airport's team in that regard, that things are trying to do things better for those that need assistance. We have a demographic that's changing. We have a lot of things that are changing, but bottom line is the dignity of operations. We want to make sure that that's happening. And you saw in the presentation, Mr. Shannon, we're looking at opportunities for improving the whole loading process, and so the kind of technology that's available for aircraft loading. But for all of us that travel regularly, we've seen, unfortunately, a lot of the unfortunate type of challenges that happen at the terminal facility, because it's not a modern facility. It's a patchwork facility that we're doing a great job of keeping together. Can't imagine the tourism issue. Again, the tourism that we know is increasing. It will continue to increase. It's a capacity issue, so let's make sure that that airport actually serves that purpose. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just have a couple quick ones left, and then unless committee members want to jump in, I mean, we can probably work towards wrapping up. I just want to say, from a perspective of master plan, I do hear MLA Morgan, but I mean, I would hope that the master plan wouldn't limit things, because it's its own, as described earlier, as its own little city in that. So, but I would think that if a hotel was built there, it would be built strictly on the opportunity created by the Economic Advisory Committee, but by private money. So in other words, not government money. And if private money felt the need was there, that the only other thing maybe I want to just point out and ask is, although it was lightly touched, oh, sorry, two more things. What type of public engagement are you getting now? Public is different. It's how one describes at one particular time. So public doesn't mean Joe Schmo on the street. But public engagement in this case may be partners around the apron and those who deal with the day-to-day or consistently in a regular manner. What type of engagement does the advisory committee do to ensure that its partners are involved in this discussion? So when the plan of Vista is rolled out and saying, hey, this is what we like, no one's shocked, or they've at least had some level of input. Mr. Chair, would you take that one? Or anyone? Thank you. Mr. Vishy.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Perfect question on how to finish up the discussion. The next steps are to consolidate and then prepare what I call a transparent package of the recommendations and the advice coming out of the InterVista's work, out of the EIC's recommendations, and those things that we've heard from the economic groups such as tourism and others. So taking that forward, there's an interim step. We want to be sure we've communicated correctly and fully with the respective governments, the city government, the territorial government, the federal government, and the Indigenous governments as well. And so we want to make sure those steps are next. So I suggest those things will happen here in the early parts of the September and that period. After that, a awareness process would continue, and we would let people understand the things that are coming forward. We haven't spoken much today about defense, but those issues are probably the most significant short-term issues that the airport will see, not driven by the airport, driven by other factors. So we'll see that happen, but yes, the public will be seeing a proposal for the airport's vision, its future, the types of investments that will be coming forward, and how it will serve them for the decades to come. And we're talking about the territory, serving the territory economically, passenger-wise, aviation-wise, the operators, and so on. So, but bang on question to finish with, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Vishin, the last question I'm going to have is built around D&D, and you've sort of jumped ahead of me. I was going to save that as my last question, which is, when I spoke to the Minister of National Defense, he said that, for example, one plane brings 200 jobs, one plane. And whether you've heard it here or not, taking the opportunity of trying to suit their needs in order to cater to them is, I'm hoping the Economic Advisory Committee is looking at that in partnership with infrastructure. But in order for them to do that, they need infrastructure in the ground that makes sense. So whether that's water and sewer, whether it's roads, etc. So is that part of the overview, assessment, strategy, and consideration on meeting those types of needs? Because if we're not rolling ourselves out or working towards joining their needs, it's hard to imagine ignoring one of the biggest customers in the sense of value, economic development. I mean, that's a lot of planes, a lot of money, and that'll help our GDP for the territory that goes everywhere, and those expertise. So I guess my last question is really about engagement with the D&D. Although there was a slide I want to point out, I did see that, and I'm grateful for that. But I think there's a lot more to the nuances of the relationship it needs to have, and hence I go to you. So Mr. Vishin, that's my last question, unless members have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, a top rate question to finish here, but bang on for the opportunity to be identified. I had the pleasure of being the Director of Engineering for Transportation back when the first FOL project was going. And you know that at the airports all across the north, Nunavut now, and with full NWT, we did so much work. Inuvik, other places where those FOL installations provided a huge economic boom at the time. Things have eased up, but things are still there. This opportunity is so significant. It means that infrastructure dollars could possibly come from a federal investment, and that is front and center. So we'll see possible runway work, taxiway work, aviation, airside work happening. But in addition, as you point out very well, the utility enhancements on the far side of the airport, right now the west side we call it, could be a significant contributor to further development of that city region on that side, as well as the aviation region. And ironically, again, my discussion with the city when I was back in my deputy transportation days was exactly before the road was built. And we were advancing the road initiative at the time. And of course, combined services is there and many other developments exist there today. It's a wonderful opportunity for the city of Yellowknife, entrepreneurial-wise and investment-wise. So we see this as a front and center topic. I have nothing, and the EAC has nothing but compliments for airport management and the department for the work that they've been doing with DND in the recent months regarding what happens. Now, much of this is confidential in nature, but it is a front and center topic at the front and center that will, again, be a catalyst investment for other things to happen around, not just the direct investment of the military, but of everyone around that service operation. So I'm sure you'll hear more from the department on that as information can be made available. Thank you.
The Deputy Minister for the final word, and I didn't bring up runway expansion because I didn't want to waste time on it, but I suspect it's involved in the bigger picture of considerations. But that said, I'll go to the Deputy Minister for a final word. I don't see any further questions from members at this time, so unless something jumps out, the urge presses that we have to get something. I'll also ask you if you want to provide any closing remarks when you finish, and then we'll close committee off at that time. Thank you. Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that was a great question, talking about the infrastructure required as we move forward, and it is something that, as Peter had alluded to, that the economic advisory as well as the infrastructure, because this is across Northwest Territories issue. There's a huge investment going on in Inuvik right now at the airport there. You have to. We're not privy to all what the final decision is or anything like that, but you got to figure if they're expanding the runway and making that kind of a capital investment, that there's going to be further work and further jobs down the road for the military from a sovereignty perspective. I've had conversations myself with the Deputy Minister in the Yukon about the economic corridors and talking about how we're going to be able to garner further economic money from Canada to upgrade the Dempster Highway and the area in the Yukon as well, their portion of the Dempster. And those are all important from a sovereignty perspective, from a resupply. So it's not just air; it's also by road. It's something that we're very cognizant on. We're working very hard on those relationships, and because there's just like there's tremendous benefit to this moving forward. And I guess in closing, I just would like to say I thank you. I really do appreciate coming to committee. We get a lot of different insights. So it's one of the parts of the job that I really enjoy. MLA Testart noted earlier that he was part of the government when we put on when we went to the revolving fund at the airport. I think he's bang on that. I think it's been really beneficial. It's one of those things that when I was airport manager, people thought we had an airport improvement fee even when we didn't. So we were getting the criticisms for it, but we weren't getting the revenue from it. It's now something, we're getting a lot of revenue, especially from tourists that are coming in using the airport. It's helping pay so that we're not competing with other big priorities such as housing, schools, hospitals, homeless strategy, social programs, and we're not competing with that. We're getting revenue a lot of times from people outside the Northwest Territories that are helping fund this. So I think this is a big win. I think this airport is it's very exciting, the work that's happening, and I think I've obviously 25 years I got quite a passion for it. I think it's something that we're around the table. I see a lot of mostly Yellowknife MLAs and everything. I think are very invested in this as well. And it's good to see some community MLAs as well. We're like I said, very happy to be here, and I appreciate all of your time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. And I would say to finish on our end, the deputy minister works through the regular process of the government and the minister and whatnot, I would encourage the Economic Advisory Committee, if they feel they need to update committee, or send us a letter, and maybe in the new calendar year, maybe it would be a good time to touch base and at least hear if there's updates that can be shared. And that said, it would be, at least by letter, interested on keeping apprised, whether we have time or you have time for meetings. I mean, that is yet to be determined, but that said, it'd be great to hear how things are proceeding along. Deputy Minister, you had a quick question. I wasn't trying to backdoor the infrastructure department, but
No, I just wanted to, I forgot to add, at some point in the future too, we'd be happy to have committee come out and tour the airport and look around airside, look at some of our facilities and everything, and see what we have to offer and see what's being sort of going forward in the future. So certainly would like to have committee out at the Yellowknife Airport at some point at a time suitable for you guys. Thank you.
no, and thanks for that. I'll ask our clerk to add that to a future agenda. I suspect we're coming to a close of a regular sitting, and with session ending here someday soon, I'm sure. Perhaps in the fall, early fall or whatnot, whatever makes sense. And then again, maybe we can tie the further discussion on with the Economic Advisory Committee. So we'll take it back and discuss it, and I'll accept the offer, and then we'll decide what we end up doing as a committee. So, folks, it looks like it has brought us to the end. And I want to thank all our presenters sincerely for your information. This is a very important project, as they all are in different ways, but this is obviously an important project that stands alone. There's a lot of opportunity here before the North, be it economic and even just the social and emotional part. Airports are key to a community. They get families, they create jobs. They're inspiring, and hearing where it's going next, I can't wait to get the next update. So at this point, I'd like to thank all members. Not seeing any final questions, I'd now like to call the discussion closed. And again, I appreciate the time of all our witnesses here today. It makes a very difference. Thank you. Have a great day.